Hello everyone, this is a topic that has frankly been a long time coming, and with EU5 being announced so soon, and another recent development that I'll get into, well, this is a video I both want and somehow feel I need to make. I'm going to be taking a lot more of a relaxed let's talk approach today, but that being said, don't worry, the highly edited video essays are still a thing and will continue still being a thing. Anyway, that's enough disclaimers. Feel free to just listen to this video or put it on your second monitor, or naturally please enjoy this footage of my personal EU4 chill run. It's an EU4 Roman, one culture, Catholic, one faith, true one tag, so no colonial nations, world, full state as Castile into Spain into Rome, with an additional restriction of no other tag switches outside of that, and yeah, let's get into the video proper. I have frequently found myself defending the Paradox DLC policy, initially not as a YouTuber or content creator or anything, just as a person that played and enjoyed the games, and while this was happening, I would sometimes get called a shill for Paradox. At which point, well, I knew I wasn't, because I wasn't getting paid. It's not like I made any money for every Paradox DLC sold. Then I started doing stuff on YouTube, and frequently the topic of DLC policy actually didn't come up. Let's be honest, most conversations tended to be around the topic of the video. And if I don't know, want to discuss how Paradox models sieges, talking about their DLC policy is a bit too tangential. Anyway, the topic would still come up, and naturally I would defend Paradox, and again, sometimes I would be accused of shilling. Now, as a person that makes videos on Paradox games, I would not tangentially be rewarded for selling DLCs, as it were. This would naturally, though, give Paradox more money, which would mean they have more money to make more games, and hence I'd have more things to make videos on. But still, that kind of a connection aside, I wasn't personally profiteering from DLC sales. Until I was. As of making this video less than a week ago, Paradox launched a new affiliate link program. It was, I want to say, rushed out and blame Paradox incompetence for some of the issues, but it actually turns out that what I was going to complain about turned out to be a me skill issue. I didn't read everything properly. So yeah, let's just say when it came to avoidable mistakes, I met Paradox halfway. But in this new program, I got a creator code, lemoncake, as well as a link which would compensate me a very generous 12% of the total sale. I did some Googling actually, and most programs of this nature offer compensation between 5% to 15%, but it's usually closer to 5% than 15% if that makes sense to you. But anyway, finally, I was a shill. I was literally getting 12% of the money if you pre-ordered EU5, or frankly bought anything else on the Paradox store using my code. Now, if you do want to support the channel and everything, well, make sure to use the code or use another creator's code if you can. It does naturally help them because, let's be honest, YouTube as a career path is not famous for stability. But that's not the topic of today's video. The reason I bring up the code is because with this introduction, I have by all definitions become a paid shill. And while I previously would unironically enough passionately defend the Paradox DLC policy and that studio as a whole, I found my defenses and convictions changing. At a time when I'm very financially incentivized to go scream, PDX good, stop asking questions, buy the game, use code lemoncake. Don't you love me? If you love me, use the code. If you don't use it, you don't love me. And if you don't love me, I hate you. I personally hate you. Okay, so I got carried away there, but you get the point. Okay, let's talk the why and how and the realities of the situation. Let's start the why section with a bit of a story. Yes, lemoncake storytime channel, you didn't ask for this, no one asked for this, but you're getting it anyway. I was out with a group of friends and the topic of money spent on video games came up. See, while this was happening, there was either a tool that was invented or a tool that was just discovered by my friends. I can't remember which one, let's be honest, it doesn't matter. But anyway, a tool that you could plug your Steam account information into, and it would tell you the average cost per hour of gaming on your Steam account. Now, my friends go use the tool. They were getting things like 15 an hour, 20 an hour. At one point, I think I saw £9 an hour, and they were pretty happy to be under 10. Then it was my turn. Now, if this was a movie, I would have been last in the order, I would have shocked everyone, the waiter would have clapped, and John Paradox himself would have descended from the heavens and given me a firm handshake and revealed himself as Albert Einstein the whole time. But I actually wasn't last to go in this conversation, but I digress completely. I plug in my Steam account and I get £0.30 per hour. How? Paradox Interactive and, well, Civ 5 to be fair too, because yes, Paradox games are expensive and DLC costs are comparable to third world country GDPs, but they're massive games with genuinely obscene amounts of content, and you could easily wait for one of the frequent sales to acquire the DLCs, or at least the older ones, at substantial discounts. Now at that point, sure, between my copy of Crusader Kings 2, Stellaris and Hearts of Iron 4 combined with Civ 5, I had only clocked around 3,000 hours between them. And yes, for those wondering, I would get into EU4 later. At this point I hadn't played EU4 even, and don't worry about me, I've got almost 20 games on Steam now. But anyway, considering the Steam summer sales when I purchased those games, I spent like £100 in total on that. On American currency conversions, that's around 130 USD. Granted, of course, I was playing Hoi4 with no DLCs around the time, with Death and Dishonor. I was playing Crusader Kings 2 with half the DLCs missing. And looking at the Steam page for Monks and Mystics going, whoa, wouldn't that be cool? And I was playing base game Stellaris in base game state because I think the Utopia DLC was the one released at this point. I can't remember, but I didn't have Utopia. But even with that limited DLC and base game prices, well, the hour per spend didn't lie. And that in many ways is the selling point of Paradox games. They are insanely deep titles with practically infinite replayability that get decades of support. If you are hypothetically a Call of Duty fan, for example, 14 years of updates in the same time period of EU4, so 2013 to let's say 2024, 11 years would involve buying 11 full-price modern AAA Call of Duty games, and all of the microtransactions involved in that as well. Now, Call of Duty isn't exactly known as a cheap game, sure, but it's a point of comparison. If you want to get the spreadsheets out for what's offered, the Paradox DLC policy is insanely money efficient for the consumer entertainment cost. But the Paradox DLC policy also wasn't static. Paradox, especially in the olden days, was in many ways, how do I put it, DLC-brained, where basically the game would practically remain the same, and if you wanted an update, buy the DLC. This would lead to entire mechanics and game features ranging from, shall we say, important but ignorable things like prosperity, to critical things like development buttons being a DLC feature. Now, is prosperity important in EU4? Yes. Can you still play EU4 without it? Sure. Without development? Yeah, I mean, you can load a game, right? But you're probably not going to be able to play it, which is why it was literally turned into a free DLC later. Indeed, over time, the consequences of this mechanic-gating DLC became even more apparent, because EU4 had to work with any combination of DLC. And when you have mechanics like development, mechanics like innovativeness, and mechanics like Golden Ages locked away with DLC, well, if you look at the default missions or DLC missions, you'll find so many, if no DLC X, do Y instead. I mean, the mechanic of coal is literally a DLC, and during my modifier stacking days, I had to add a rule that the route was current patch or DLC, no disabling DLCs, because in many cases you could squeeze out extra modifiers by playing a vanilla mission Saxony, and then forming Emperor DLC Prussia followed by Domination DLC Austria, compared to just an all-on-the-same DLC run. France, for example, and I think this is probably one of the most egregious examples, has a vanilla mission tree for no DLC, an Emperor DLC minor mission tree if you have the Emperor DLC and not Domination DLC, a Domination DLC light mission tree if you have the Domination DLC but no Emperor DLC, and a Domination full mission tree if you have the Domination DLC and the Emperor DLC. And on top of that being insanity, keeping track of all of these contingencies and coding around, well, you can't have an Achieve 20 innovativeness mission, but if you do code that, then you have to check if you have the Rule Britannia DLC and then add a completely different mission for them if they don't have the Rule Britannia DLC because they don't have innovativeness. Well, let's be honest, it just adds loads more work for the developers. In an ideal world, this is redundant dev work. All of this would lead to core features and mechanics being moved to the free updates, while the DLCs would on average tend to either have specialized mechanics or just flavor missions. After all, the Aztecs not having a mission tree or their unique national mechanic doesn't tend to impact your game as Poland, or impact the development of Poland, because normally you don't have to check if Poland has a sufficiently low level of doom before they're allowed to proceed with their missions. Naturally though, this shift in DLC focus also leads to a shift in complaining online. One would think this policy would let you buy flavor or, replace the flavor with mods and give you all the game mechanics included, which, sounds like a pretty good thing and should be well received, and while it certainly was in certain corners of the internet, the new standard complaint became how the Paradox DLCs offered nothing that mods didn't already provide and how greedy Paradox was again. This was then combined with a bunch of DLCs that, how do I put it in corporate speak, did not reach the expected level of quality, or to put it into human speak, were broken, terrible, buggy messes that literally broke the game in the most abject definition of the term. DLCs like Emperor, followed by the work of cosmic horror known as Leviathan on release, were frankly unexcusable, and while eventually they were fixed, it certainly wasn't inherently a good thing. This wasn't an EU4 moment either, or even a temporary bout of insanity. Hearts of Iron 4, for example, has a less than stellar reputation, and that's saying something for both the South America DLC, that has a name I forgot, and of course, the mess that was, and continues to be, the Graveyard of Empires. But what I think is important to recognize is that the flaw wasn't the system. The same system that gave you Graveyard of Empires gave you Gotterdammerun, a DLC that has some flavor for Germany, Austria, and I think some other countries, I'm not actually sure, and even a light mechanic around secret projects. In terms of scope and design philosophy, it's no different than Graveyard of Empires, but the failure and success was entirely based on execution as well as the countries chosen for these DLCs, not from an inherent flaw in the setup. And while these things aren't good for Paradox's brand image, Leviathan was eventually fixed. EU4 had a bunch of good DLC releases after, like for example Domination and King of Kings, both were good, and even Victoria 3, a game we are about to talk about, like right now actually, just had Charters of Commerce release, which was for all intents and purposes a good DLC. A large aspect of what I think makes the Paradox DLC policy work in an ironic sense of the term is a gentleman's agreement between the players and Paradox that even if Paradox does a boo-boo and makes a bad DLC or releases a bad game, Paradox will keep supporting it very quickly, like for Stellaris, frankly, by the Utopia release. You hit the domain of incredible game, and from then on outwards, well, it's only up. You can have a couple bumps in the road, but they only keep getting better. And so the understanding is, Paradox will go back, they will fix things, and they will make a good, then great, then incredible game. But this brings us to Paradox's recent releases. Oh boy. Let's start with Victoria 3, since I've already mentioned it. Victoria 3 has been hyped up to high heaven and back. Valve may have its When Portal 3 or When Half-Life 3, but Paradox had When Viccy 3. Every PDXCon announcement or whatever, people would ask for Viccy 3. It became a meme on itself, so even people that didn't care about Victoria 3 would ask for it, sure, but like from an audience demand point of view, this is a free win for Paradox. Then finally, after what felt like a decade, they announced it, Victoria 3. Hype. Huge day one players and purchases, and it's Victoria 3. Even Victoria 3 fans will concede the game has plenty, and I do mean plenty of flaws, and more crucially, it's in a controversial state. Not to say bad, but controversial in the sense that a lot of people have at this point gone, yeah, this ain't for me, chief, left, and are now disillusioned with Paradox. Victoria 3, of course, now has had a lot of updates, a lot of work, but honestly, to this day, can I call it good? No. I cannot in good faith look at Victoria 3, a Paradox game almost 3 years after release, and say, yeah, good game. But if it was just Victoria 3, it could have been hand-waved. Just one bad team or department, a difference in visions, a large section of the audience becoming disillusioned, but sure, it's something different for other people. Look, it'll become eventually good. Paradox is far too competent and has too much to goodwill to die Victoria 3, right? But Victoria 3 isn't the one example. Victoria 3 isn't alone. Imperator Rome happened, and Imperator Rome was also controversial. More so than even Victoria 3, but the sentiment was clear. Don't play it now, wait for later. They developed a whole brand new engine for the game, or if you want to be super pedantic about it, because I had this conversation multiple times, they greatly updated the old Clausewitz engine, practically reworking it and dragging it kicking and screaming into the post-2015 world. But in the process, they delivered, in my opinion, an incredible map, an amazing engine, a Paradox logo, and really not much else. They forgot to put the game into the game, and while people were disappointed, an understanding, of course, was that it would be give it a year of DLCs and it would be good. And I think, honestly, it would have been good eventually, but Paradox did something bad. They pulled the plug. From a financial point of view, it kind of makes sense, right? No one's playing the game, but they failed to deliver on their core promise of stick with us and we'll make it amazing, delegating Imperator Rome into an unfinished beta project. Imperator Rome did sacrifice itself to give Paradox the funding for a new engine, one already used for Victoria 3 controversially, and then by Crusader Kings 3 successfully, and I would say at the moment by EU5 as well. But in the process, it dealt a huge blow to the trust of the players, because the understanding was clear. You could drop a full game price on a pretty map with no game, and if you're unlucky, Paradox will just pull the plug on you. Now, it wasn't all doom and gloom, of course. Crusader Kings 3 had a lot of people complaining, and indeed, it's a game that took its time with updates and new content, sure, but at this point, I think they are literally not adding societies as a point of principle, which, frankly, fair enough. It's a design decision I disagree with, and I think it'll be a free win for them to do so, but Crusader Kings 3 launched with both, I would say, sufficient early game content in terms of flavor and events compared to Crusader Kings 2 to be new enough, and with enough new mechanics like the map rework to justify a new game. What I mean to say is that a new launch of a Paradox title is possible, but at the same moment, the Paradox record isn't good. After all, to add to all of this, we also had City Skylines 2. That happened, and that again was a major blow to Paradox Interactive and of course their reputation. So what's happening? Well, I think the gentleman's agreement is broken. Imperator Rome is dead. That money and trust invested is gone. Victoria 3 is chugging along sure, and maybe if they keep dropping DLCs of the last one's caliber, by late 2026 it'll be a good game. But it's Victoria 3. It's a game hyped up for a decade and was basically a free win from a marketing point of view, but had launched and subsequent support so bad it sits anywhere between 1/2 and 2/3 of the EU4 player count. A game that hasn't been updated in almost a year, and a game for which the sequel is announced and is right around the corner. It's so bad that on my EU5 videos and posts, I've had to reassure people that both the early versions of EU5 that I played like 3 months ago, and the second release version they provided me now, is, well, also coincidentally 3 months from release, is not Victoria 3. It is better than Victoria 3. We are genuinely at a point where the goodwill damage from these relations and other debacles like City Skylines 2 cannot be understated. So what happens now with EU5? Well, again, I've had access to the game, and I can't share screenshots and videos under the NDA. The problem is that, well, it's actually good. I think they cared about this one. There are bugs and issues, but the problem isn't a lack of content or flavor. England in the current version of EU5 is launching with what I would say is more unique stuff than EU4 England has after the game's been finished. And England isn't alone in this regard. The plan is 40 countries to have complete level content, including not just the major players like England and France, but also countries like Scotland. Now, I don't have the time to play everything. I haven't had the time to play past, I think 1386 is my latest save at the moment, but at the same time, it's a Paradox game and a huge one at that with insane depth. It's looking pretty good. In my playtime in the last 50 hours, I've had one desktop crash compared to the 3 months ago playtime semi-regular crashes. There are still bugs, but the issues are things that can be literally fixed under the bug fix approach. And again, the problems are that, for example, right now, if you're England, and only England has this issue, you can send a diplomat to improve relations, after which he will instantly come home saying he's already improved relations to the cap, after improving relations to just +0. This naturally is kind of funny. Everyone in the world out there is using their diplomats to improve relations and participate in the global environment. Meanwhile, England is out there sending diplomats which are firmly but politely turned around and instantly sent home. Memes aside, every other country has normal diplomats, and I reported this issue, and I want to say with a 95% certainty the bug will be fixed by release because a lot have already been fixed. They certainly aren't relying on YouTubers playtesting on the game either. I will want to confirm that, but they are paying attention as well to the feedback they're getting. They're engaging in good faith and actually making this a good game from day one. And of the problems that do remain 3 months from release, well, as far as I can tell, they boil down to bug fixes. I still need to play to the late game. I still need to play more unconventional countries and frankly play the game a lot more. But I can confidently say that it's a good game for the first 70 hours of gameplay I've had in total already. They did not forget to put the game into the game here. At the same time though, we need to acknowledge that it's Paradox. It's already not well known for its communication. Its grandiose claims over population and map size are good, but they bring up concerns over performance, which is, in my opinion, good. They made huge jumps in performance compared to 3 months ago, and I don't believe this has been well communicated. So instead, the prevalent understanding among the consumers is, well, 2013 game, a lag hard with 1/4 of map, so 2025 game, lag harder on bigger map. And you know what, that's not an incorrect statement, that's a pretty logical line of reasoning. Now, as I found, it is a bigger resource hog than EU4, but I can still play the game comfortably on high graphics settings while running OBS, Chrome tabs, Discord, Spotify, and while also running on a graphics card that's 7 years old on a processor that's 5 years old. To be clear, my graphics card is a 2080 Super Ti and my processor is an i9-10850. So okay, that line is good, or at least good enough when you bear in mind that cloud gaming support from GeForce Now also exists. But what about the content on release? Well, again, they plan to have 40 countries with complete game-level content, but they communicate this by, on the pre-order page, launching a DLC roadmap. For crying out loud, Paradox, please, you have people worried that you have nothing in the game, and you've released a bare-bones game, and you're going to be taking stuff out of the game to sell as DLC later, and what you do to address this concern is you publish a roadmap with planned DLC, implying that's what you've done. I know that's not what you've done. I know you're just showing off your plans for 2026, but you need to understand that your consumers, EU4 players, are EU4 players, right? Have you ever wondered why the literacy rate of the developed world is 99%, not 100%? Well, that's those two EU4 players that single-handedly refuse to read and will only communicate in green for good and red for bad. We're talking about individuals where I genuinely don't understand how do they manage to avoid suffocation without a constant pop-up telling them that breathing is a green activity. And then, when EU4 players have an original thought, being that, EU4 has DLC. And DLC is when content. So if EU5 knew and has no DLC, maybe EU5 has no content. You give them a graphic that they think confirms a suspicion saying, here is EU5 and here is when content or DLC will happen. But on the topic then of DLC policy, well, it works. It still does. And if anything, Paradox has gotten more and more consumer friendly. I know, gasps and shocks, but before, if there was a bad DLC that had a mechanic like prosperity, you need to buy content for China if you have no intentions of playing in China because you wanted to use the prosperity mechanic. Now, if you don't want to play in Sweden, the Line of the North DLC isn't necessary to buy because you're not unlocking artillery regiments with that DLC. If you're coming into a game late into development, so there's already 200 quid worth of stuff, you can buy a subscription for a month for just a $5 to try the things, and unless you spend literal years paying for said subscription, you do save money with it. It's a great option, and I think honestly it would be more popular if other companies hadn't ruined the idea of subscriptions by making everything under the sun a subscription. I mean, subscribing for car features, come on now, but okay. There are enough people saying car feature subscriptions are bad, you don't need to hear it from me. That said again though, for Paradox's DLC policy, there are plenty of frequent sales. And if you're missing 1 or 2 or 3 immersions pack for some countries, honestly, it's not the end of the world. And in return, the games get continued support, and given the scope of these games, I think that's a good practice. But where it breaks down is when you release new games and you break your gentleman's agreement with the players. When you release a game with multiple DLCs and full support later, it still sucks. The gentleman's agreement breaks down. When you release a game that abandoned it, the gentleman's agreement breaks down. And when you do a City Skylines 2, the gentleman's agreement breaks down. I do think that in general the industry as a whole, namely the gaming industry, has not exactly helped Paradox sell either pre-orders or even day one purchases because, well, Bethesda's Fallout 76 happened, No Man's Sky happened. Although I heard the last one is actually good now, but anyway, that's not the point. Plenty of big studios have not exactly been helping set the general mood towards pre-orders or even playing on day one in a positive light. But even treating Paradox in isolation, well, on the 19th of August at Gamescom, EU5 would announce both release date and open pre-orders. There was a lot of hype around EU5. It has been in development since 2019 after all, and this part, I will say the Tinto talks, looking back now, how close we are to the release of EU5, I do believe the Tinto talks are a good thing, especially looking at the soon-to-be-done form of the final game. I would even go so far to say that the mood around EU5 is not just positive, but very excited, and yet within all of that context, well, let's look at the public comments. My comments on my EU5 announcement poll, and not calling any creators out in public or anything, I'm genuinely just taking random examples here. But for example, Lath from Social Streamers announcement poll, or even Ludi's EU5 announcement poll, the prevailing sentiment in the comment is, remember no pre-orders. I will be hyped for EU5 in like 5 years and will be playable after 15 DLCs, and stuff like one I found pretty funny, and it's kind of funny in terms of laughing through tears comment, but Victoria 3 is the greatest video game of all time. It single-handedly cured all Paradox players' insomnia. Damn, Victoria 3 was so bad it taught EU4 players how to read. Incredible, what an achievement. And again, I'm not cherry-picking here. If you look at Lath's poll announcement, The top comment is basically never pre-order, followed by I love you Lathe but absolutely not, and naturally, if I was going to do it, I would use your link, but I'm never pre-ordering. Going over to Ludi's, and actually I'll admit the top comment there is a request for Ludi to return their wallet, but the sentiment is much the same. It goes through other content creators that have also announced EU5 and opened with pre-orders. You're going to find much the same sentiment. And well, it's time for me to get in trouble with Paradox, but in this case, look, this negative sentiment is their fault. They're reaping the consequences of their actions, they're feeling the consequences of the launch and state of Victoria 3, the consequences of abandoning Imperator Rome, the consequences of their high-profile publishing side, namely of course that of City Skylines 2, or even side projects like Empire of Sin. The players here are correct in their reservations. I cannot in good faith say any of them are wrong based on the information presented to them. And yet what I think pains me the most is that I do believe they did good with EU5. I still think they can't exactly AFK these last 3 months, believe me, they have their work cut out of them in terms of bug fixes, but the content and the game, at least from what I have seen, I hope there's stuff happening after 1450, sorry I haven't got that far yet, but it's a very complicated and it's a very in-depth game and it's very good. And sure, if you're coming in from Crusader Kings 3 or even Victoria 3, get ready for a lot of menu reading and learning, but it's a genuinely very positive looking game. But what I think will happen is Paradox is going to regain its goodwill on the EU5, only to do a Paradox moment and release an innovation like Stellaris 2.0 or God knows what else they're working on, March of the Eagles 2, and have another Victoria 3 moment. EU5 will suffer from the consequences of their previous titles, and it will rebuild goodwill that will probably get squandered again. I do think there is some hope though. CK3 still proves that good releases can happen, and in the same way I think the worst of the EU4 DLC policy was concentrated around Emperor and Domination, Paradox could have just had a series of good publication skill issues recently, and after EU5 all will return to being good, and on that note, well, your guess is as good as mine on to what will happen next. But okay, we pointed fingers, I've made some conclusions, but the question at hand remains, should you pre-order? And well, I'm not your mum. I could have made a 3-hour video essay about how amazing EU5 is, and what's honestly amazing is I wouldn't be lying in it in the process, and I could have pushed my code during that whole video, and I would think make a pretty penny from it. But as much as it pains me to say this because I'm leaving money on the table, and I like money, the only time I think it makes sense to pre-order a digital product like EU5 is when you already plan to play the game on day one. If you're me, or you're me with Crusader Kings 3 and you're buying and playing the game on day one, you may as well grab the pre-order and grab the pre-order bonus. It costs the same, but you get extra things. In that environment, go ahead. But if you're not buying it or pre-ordering it day one, it's more than fine to wait for post-release reviews. It's fine to wait until a bunch of people like in the thousands have played the game and made their opinions known. That's all fine. I won't judge you personally for it, believe me, and I would even go so far as to say that even though I am, to the best of my knowledge, telling you the truth here when I say EU5 good, I understand your skepticism given that I'm literally financially incentivized to say that. I can only hope though that many of the bugs do get fixed, a new gold standard is set for EU5's release, and Paradox continues to do well, not just from a YouTube channel point of view, but also from a Paradox player point of view. This campaign you see in the background, while I only recorded it as B-roll for this video, I considered sharing it maybe, I might still do, but like, I do relax after making an EU4 video by playing EU4. I do regularly play other Paradox games too, not just for recording purposes, from Crusader Kings to Stellaris. When I say I want Paradox to succeed, I also say that because I want to keep playing good games. But okay, you made it to the end. Here, if you still have at least some of your attention left, I would request that within the comment section you engage with this topic in good faith as much as possible. Otherwise, well, likes and subscriptions are always appreciated, but indeed that is all the time I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching, with a special thank you to all my channel members, especially Ark, Soda, Suleiman, Lord Zendikar, Nick Haas, Nanhatan, Star72, The Awesome Rabbit, Best for Gaming, Grandma Flavia, Lebarule, W Haste, Sov, Anthony35, AC Napo, Conspiracy Pizza, Yukata, Danray, Malvi, Jack, Ryland, Stuart Allen, Andrew Black, Nebula, Xantronic, and Twinett.